Wii games are quite hit or miss when it comes to accessibility in gaming. Some of them look pretty good, like Super Mario Galaxy 2 and especially Kirby's Epic Yarn. But one of the Wii games with more negative accessibility is the one with a huge online presence even to this day, Mario Kart Wii. Looking back on the franchise, Mario Kart Wii has the least forgiving art style consistently, especially when you consider that this is one of the newer games in the series. Now, before I start racing, I wanted to talk about how I'm doing my research for this video. I will be replicating what it was like to play a Wii game as originally intended as I can. So that means original hardware, and I'll be sitting further away than usual from my TV, as flat screens weren't as common back in the Mario Kart Wii days. Plus, I naturally need to sit closer to big TVs anyway due to my severe visual impairment, so I'm gonna act as if I was told off for sitting too close as a child. I'll also be using Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to further explain the differences by comparing two courses from each against their Wii counterparts. Another thing I'd like to point out are my own personal limitations so you can get a better grasp of where I'm coming from. Without using any medical terms, one of my eyes sees games in a darker and fuzzier way, while the other isn't as bad, but my vision is still fuzzy even with glasses. Another visual issue I have that often affects things is when two items of a similar colour are on top of each other. For example, if I was to place a dark blue rug on a black floor, the colours are going to visually mix for me and the dark blue rug will disappear. Especially in darker rooms. This also applies to lighter objects and backgrounds in brighter rooms. Think of it like how a chameleon hides in bushes and trees. Now, without further ado, let's get started. To start off, I chose 4 tracks to compare. 2 appearing in Double Dash, which are Peach Beach and Waluigi Stadium. 1 that shows up in the base courses for Mario Kart 8, being Grumble Volcano. And lastly, to make things more fair in comparing Mario Kart 8 tracks, I went with Coconut Mall that's in Wave 1 of the Booster Course Pass. First off is Peach Beach, which originated in Mario Kart Double Dash and also makes a return in Mario Kart Wii. Now right off the bat, you can already tell that the art style is much muddier on the left in Mario Kart Wii, while it's more vibrant and colourful in Double Dash. The colours pop more in the latter and it's easier to differentiate between each other. Even the sky is brighter in Double Dash, and although this track doesn't suffer from it as much as some of the later tracks in this video, it is getting harder to tell the difference between the edge of the road and the beginning of the off-road sections in Mario Kart Wii. One minor thing I'll mention that's also an accessibility issue in Mario Kart Wii that isn't something that can really be resolved well is that the blue shell blends in with the sky of brighter tracks sometimes, which would make dodging them with a mushroom much harder to some blind and visually impaired people. However, I am prepared to say that this isn't at the fault of Nintendo, since it's part of the art style and they can't really change the colour of the blue shell, as they've always been that way. Sadly, not every game can be 100% accessible to every single person, and some things just can't be fixed. On the bright side though, they do make sounds as they approach the player, which gives an audible cue on when to use your mushroom instead. Next up is the last Mario Kart Double Dash track we'll be talking about in this video today, Waluigi Stadium. Unlike Peach Beach, which is still a bright, colourful track despite Mario Kart Wii's art style, Waluigi Stadium is a track based on a dirt bike course, which means it's mostly mud and a lot of browns in different shades, with the odd obstacles thrown in. I had trouble with the Double Dash version due to this, despite it still being the better option currently, so I wasn't as disappointed as I should have been when I played the Wii version. Remember how I mentioned back on Peach Beach that Wii made it harder to tell the difference between the road's ending and the off-road's beginning? Well, the muddy art style mixed with the literal mud means that there were a lot of gradients, which often led to misjudgment on where the side of the road ends. One shade of brown off and I've lost that momentum. One good thing I will say about Wii's version though is that they made obstacles like the fire rings and giant piranha plants more forgiving. Wii's new edition of half pipes lets you avoid them entirely, and the fireballs are more spread out. I'll be honest, I didn't expect Waluigi Stadium to be the least forgiving. I went into this video thinking the next one would deserve that title. Introducing the first Nitro track we're going to look at, which features one of the most broken shortcuts that then later showed up in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Grumble Volcano. Normally comparing Mario Kart Wii to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is like comparing apples to oranges. But this not only gives us an insight into how accessible Grumble Volcano is in Wii, but also lets us look at what 8 Deluxe did right and wrong after Wii's issues we mentioned earlier. First of all, Mario Kart Wii's version actually has a nice colour difference between the roads and the off-roads, though it might still be a bit hard to see for some people. There's even a slightly dark line between the two, which Waluigi Stadium could have really benefited from if done well enough to suit the dirt bike theme. Of course, the art style is still muddy and the cave sections have that slight gradient issue I kept mentioning, but it's luckily one of the more forgiving tracks in Wii, and I'd honestly say that it's easier to see than the 8 Deluxe version. It, however, was onto something adding lights to the fronts of the carts and bikes in 8 Deluxe. One thing people will need to look out for is that Grumble Volcano breaks apart as you race through it, making some roads thinner and possibly harder to distinguish. Before those parts of the track crumble away, they show up in the form of cracks on the road. I can see these cracks being hard to see for some people, but they do break in the same places each lap, so if you memorise the holes you might be good to go. Grumble Volcano also has a similar problem to the blue shells in Peach Beach, except with red shells due to the red and orange hues in places. But like I mentioned earlier with the blue shells, it's not really Nintendo's fault, nothing could realistically be done, and they also have an audible cue before it hits the player. Lastly, we're going to look at an iconic track that made a grand return earlier this year in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now for the final track we'll be looking at in this video, Coconut Mall. I decided to use a Booster Course Pass track as an example too, since the lighting in them is often different and they're more colourful over the base game's more realistic detailing. Now, don't let the nostalgia fool you, there are problems with Wii's Coconut Mall, though they're minimal compared to the previous tracks. Wii's is still muddy and with almost all the floors being the same colour throughout. That can be an issue for some visually impaired people. If you look to the right on the Booster Course Pass, that's something it fixes. The track starts as a dark grey followed by a shiny brown floor in the mall, then you fall onto an orangey yellow type floor before going from brown again to a light blue. Meanwhile, we stuck to the same two colours being light grey and cream in the exact same parts of the track I mentioned for 8 Deluxe. The last thing I'd like to mention are the escalators. I've seen people complain about these when the Booster Course Pass was first revealed, and from both a nostalgia and realism standpoint, I agree with the masses. Escalators in real malls don't have glowing arrows saying which way is up or down. Plus, there is something humorous about seeing your friends attempt to go up a down escalator. But from an accessibility standpoint, that and it's a tour port, but we'll ignore that, I welcome this change. Even if you struggle with seeing colours, the moving arrows are also there and can be seen from a distance, which is amazing. In conclusion though, Mario Kart Wii has a ton of issues and really isn't the best in terms of accessibility. But on a more positive note, that doesn't affect how near and dear the game is to my heart and childhood. The game is still fun, even if it aged like Moo Moo Meadow's milk, and I have to practically memorise certain tracks. And I'm really glad to have seen future installments improve on the issues. Mostly. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe, and if you haven't yet, definitely join the Gaming Reinvented Discord server. Until the next video, bye!